Hello and welcome to the Holographic podcast. I'm your host, Tony D, and my co-host Kyle. He had a last-minute conflict. He can't join us for this podcast, but he should be back next time. So it's just me and my crazy thoughts. I am excited for this podcast. I've been thinking about this sort of thing for a while, and so I'm excited to get my thoughts out. This podcast is going to be about time travel, extra dimensions, parallel universes, and some other trippy, cool theories. So the name of the podcast, the Holographic podcast, is from the Hologram Theory. And a lot of what I do, a lot of what I say, a lot of what I think is inspired by hologram theory. So I just want to briefly go over that as we go into more of these theories, because I'm going to tie it together, and I'm going to touch on hologram theory because I think it's connected to it. And I wanted to talk about this, and I want to talk about these different theories because there is a difference between theory and reality, right? There's theory and there's reality. And that's okay. Theory, you start out with having theories and you start out with thinking things, and then you see it through and you see if it works with reality or not. Or you see if it's a fact or not. And sometimes, from a philosophical standpoint, it's not necessarily factual. It's just things that are ideas, and that's okay. So this is kind of where this show is going to be in this theory, almost fact, not quite reality, rolling around in our heads sort of thing. And hopefully, some people will think about things some more, and hopefully some people will come up with some theories of their own. And that's the whole point of this show. But anyway, hologram theory, the nature of the universe in hologram theory is that the universe is really, our reality is really made up of light and energy and wavelength and interference patterns and a lot of different things. In an implicit standpoint, there's an implicit, in other words, implicit means kind of behind the scenes that we don't really detect or understand, implicit energies and implicit information. And that creates reality. And then as humans, as these creatures on this planet, we've evolved to create with our minds and our senses a different reality that we can sense and that we use to negotiate through our lives and to make it easier. In other words, if we only had access to light and energy and wavelength, evolving as higher creatures might have been different and more difficult, and we wouldn't have been able to do the things we do. But instead, our brains make it simpler and create this hologram of reality, an explicit reality that we can then use and negotiate and find food and water and et cetera, et cetera. So that's the basic hologram theory, is there's an implicit reality of information and light and energy, and an explicit reality of this world of solid things that we create that we can explain. That's basic hologram theory. So the other things I want to talk about are time travel and dimensions and multiverses, multiple universes. So let's start with time travel. Time travel is very popular in movies and TV shows. In pop culture, time travel is very prevalent. It's almost everywhere, and it's interesting to think about, and it's fun to write and to make films with, and it's fun to watch. So time travel is a lot of places. I said many shows ago, I said that humans don't have a very good understanding of time. We kind of, time, we're at time's mercy. Time just is. And we live in this reality, and and time just goes, and we don't really know a whole lot about it. We're just creatures of the time in our reality. And I stick with that. I stick with what I said, that we don't, when people say like, oh, time is this, time is circular, time is cyclical, time is a single line, time is defining everything, time, blah, 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 everything, all the different theories about time. I get it. I get that people have their theories about time. I personally don't have a lot of theories about time, because I think time is just something that is, and I'm not sure. I'm okay with saying I'm not sure where time came from, what it's doing, when it's going to end. Like, I don't know. Time is time, right? But time travel is the idea that you can go back and forward through time. And it's very popular, again, in culture, that you go back and forth through time. So my ideas that I've been thinking about is that time travel really is not feasible. You were probably going to think I was going to say, oh, here's how you time travel. No, it's the opposite. I think time travel is actually not going to happen. And I'll tell you exactly why. First, I should say that traveling forward in time is actually, or is relatively easy. And I say relatively because of the theory of relativity. So in macro physics and basic Einsteinian physics, Newtonian physics, you have these laws of physics, and one of them is relativity. And that means that a clock at sea level is going to go faster than a clock up in the International Space Station. And that's true. That's been recorded, that this is a science fact, that a clock up in space is going to go slower than a clock here at sea level because of gravitational forces and relativity and speed and all these things that you put together. So what that means, and this has been in many movies, what that means is that if you got into a very fast spaceship and you flew away from the Earth out in space and you approached the speed of light, according to basic Newtonian physics, you can't go faster than the speed of light. If you approach the speed of light and you traveled for a while, maybe multiple light years, and then somehow you slowed down, you turned around, and you traveled back to the Earth, you would have aged much slower than people here on Earth. So they would have aged much quicker. So maybe only a couple years had gone by. Maybe if you traveled, let's say 10 light years, 5 there and 5 back, you traveled 10 light years, you only aged 10 years. People here on Earth would have aged, I don't know the exact calculations, but many times more than that, maybe 100 years. I'm not sure. I'll have to go into exactly what those numbers are, but you're going to age much slower. Hence, when you get back to Earth, you would have traveled forward in time. You would have aged slowly, and they would have aged much quicker. So you would have then gone, you would have left in 2030, thought you were coming back in 2040, but you're really coming back in 2090, or 3000. So that's how you travel forward in time. Right now, that's not feasible, just with the energy that we have, and the spaceships aren't able to go that fast and stop and turn around, and people in space are exposed to radiation. So while there's still hurdles and we're not able to do it exactly like that right now, it's possible. If humans put their mind to it, they could do that in the future, travel into the future, and that's how you do it. Then, so that's just a quirk of the cosmos and relativity, that we can travel into the future like that. But traveling to the past is a different story, right? So there's all sorts of theories about how time travel is possible to the past, and all sorts of different popular culture ideas of it, the flux capacitor and Back to the Future and different things like that. And almost all of those ideas come from vast amounts of energy. You need a lot of energy to do these things. In fact, a lot of these equations that physicists are coming up with in theoretical physics that have to do with cool things like time travel and traveling out in space takes so much energy. Some of them are crazy, like, oh, it takes half of the energy of the entire universe. So it's just not feasible from that aspect. But even from a theoretical aspect, even from just thinking about it, I'm going to tell you why time travel into the past isn't going to happen, and it will never happen. And the reason is because if it does happen, if it eventually will happen, where are the time travelers? Why is our reality not filled with time travelers that have come back here and screwed something up and messed some shit up? And so there is a theory that if someone travels back in time, they may create a different reality. They may create a branch reality. Or also there's a theory that if they travel back in time and change your timeline, you don't know. We don't know. So they could have traveled back here and I don't know. Okay. So we have these ideas about traveling back in time, and there's a couple options. There's a couple possibilities. One possibility is that no one has traveled back in time and we haven't seen them and we don't know. And the other possibility is that they have traveled back in time, but our reality has changed. But in either of these possibilities, we are just still who we are and there are no time travelers. So with the second possibility, if reality changes and we don't know about it, then I sit, in my opinion, then who cares? Then that's not a reality. That's not actually happening. And that's a controversial statement, but I'm going to stick with it because if there's no proof and there's no actual reality and there's no change and there's no reason and there's nothing and there's just, then what's the point? Then why would you even claim something and an attempt to think that it's true? In other words, the old saying, if a tree falls in the woods and makes a sound of falling and no human is there to hear it, does it really make a sound? And it's a philosophical question, but the answer to that is yes, it does make a sound because it is in our world, it's in our biosphere. And when that tree fell, other animals it created sound waves. And if a human ear didn't hear it, those sound waves reached a multitude of living creatures. The sound waves went through our biosphere, the air of our biosphere, and changed things slightly on a minuscule level, but still changed things. So that is a reality. Even if there are no humans around, when things happen in our biosphere, according to this philosophical question, my answer is yes. It made a sound, just it didn't hit a human ear. And now, if you relate that to what I'm saying, if someone travels back in time and changes reality and no one knows about it, did it really happen? And my answer is no, it didn't really happen. Because reality is just reality. There is no change. And so someone was, well, but what if someone changed something and you didn't know, but it actually happened? If none of us know it happened and none of us have seen anything and none of us can prove anything and no one's done anything, then no, I say no, it didn't actually happen. Philosophically. In reality, I think that our world would be much more chaotic. I think that time would have these different issues with the different forces that we deal with in Newtonian physics. I think all of that would be much different, and there would be some crazy, weird stuff going on if there were time travelers messing up things and going back and forth in reality. And people say, oh, there's these, like, I see these, clicks on the internet where oh, time travel comes from the future and says this, and you can tell someone's traveled through time because their outfit is different. And that's all just fun clickbait that doesn't have to do with reality. In reality, there is no proof of time travel going backwards. There is no time travelers coming from the future. There is no proof or notice of change in our realities from that aspect. So in my opinion, it's not happening. Could my opinion change? Absolutely. If someone, there is a new movie, there's a new movie on Amazon Prime. I can't remember the name of it, but the premise is there's time travelers from the future that are dealing with a particular nasty alien invasion, and they come back from the future and they have to take people to fight because the humans are almost dead, extinct. So they need some more fighters. I hope that doesn't happen. But if something like that happened, if there were actual people from the future that have traveled here and that encounter us, and there's this, that there's this thing going down, yeah, I'll change my mind. Okay, great. Time travel is possible. I can totally change my mind if I have some sort of reasonable, feasible evidence. But with time travel, there is no reasonable, feasible evidence. It's just pop culture. It's just for fun. It's just fiction. So let's keep it there. Let's keep it in fiction. And let's not think that time travel to the past is actually possible, because it really isn't. If I change my mind, if you can travel from the future and come change my mind, then do it. But, and that's the thing that, I say this, okay, if someone travels from the future, pop in right now and change my mind. Not happening. Didn't happen. It's not going to happen. All right. So time travel, it's fun, pop culture, interesting. It's not a reality. Traveling back and forth through time is not a reality. Let's talk about some realities. Let's talk about the next couple things I want to talk about, which are extra dimensions and parallel universes. So there's a big difference between extra dimensions and parallel universes. So parallel universes means that the theory is that there are multiple different realities of the universe in existence that are existing with ours. And some of those theories say that there's actually an infinite number of different universes. And some of those theories say that though all those different universes have everything we have, but slightly different. So there could be an infinite number of parallel different realities that are just like ours, but maybe in one I have a red hat. Everything else is the same, but I just have a red hat. If the theory is that there's an infinite number of them, then that is possible. If, and a lot of these theoretical physicists and a lot of these theories rely on infinity and rely on the idea that it's not necessarily just one alternate universe. It's got to be an infinite number of alternate universes where there's everything is slightly different or everything is totally different. There's different laws of physics in those alternate universes, or there's just one small change, like I don't exist, or, things like that. And so I'll talk about those in a second, or more than a second. I'll talk about those in a few minutes. But that's one idea. Different realities, different universes, totally different universe, totally different. Everything's in a different reality, completely and utterly outside of this reality. Little change, big change, I don't know, but it's not the same universe, completely different universe, and that's parallel universes. Now there's extra dimensions, and different and dimensional travel and dimensional shifts are in this universe and are in this reality. It's just a question of what we sense and what we feel and what we can see or hear or taste or touch has to do with the dimensions that you live in and the dimensions that you go through. So in my opinion, and this is something that I've been thinking about a lot recently, and really why I'm doing the shows to talk about extra dimensions, is because in my opinion, multiple dimensions and going through different dimensions and sensing different dimensions is a reality. Multiple universes and going to multiple universes is not a reality. So I'll talk about it further. Again, multiple universes in the multiverse, it's really popular right now in pop culture, in books, in TV, in movies. You see multiple in physics theories. Theoretical physicists talk about it a lot these days because it's fun and it's interesting and it gets people interested in physics. And that's great. They can do all the theories they want and they can do all the equations they want. But in reality, in my opinion, there's no point in really talking about multiple universes from a real perspective. If you want to write a movie about it, if you want to go see a movie about it, that's great. More power to you. I love fun movies. I love movies with multiverse. You know, I love multiverse movies, but I don't fool myself into thinking that that's a reality. It is not a reality, and I'll touch on that in a second. More than a second. I'll touch on that in a few minutes. What is a reality is extra dimensions and traveling through different dimensions and sensing different dimensions. So let's talk about dimensions because that's important. And that has to do with hologram theory. When it comes to hologram theory, there's an implicit reality and an explicit reality. And that's basically how you break it down. But it could be much more complicated than that. It could really have to do with multiple dimensions and our sensing and our being able to negotiate different dimensions. And that could explain a lot of different things, and it can help help us humans go through this reality if you could understand how to go through different dimensions. But right now we live in three dimensions. We're three-dimensional creatures. So one dimension would be a line. Actually, that's not true. I'm sorry. One dimension would be a point. Or no, I'm sorry. A zero dimension would be a point. One dimension would be a line. Two dimension would be a square, and three dimension would be a cube. Now I got it. So if you lived in, so right now we live in a three-dimensional universe, which is like a cube, which would be a cube in this analogy and what I'm talking about. We're three dimensions. We have length and width and depth. Length, width, height, and depth, the cube. If you're in two dimensions, it's just a square, right? So if you looked at a two-dimensional reality like this, it's my hand, it's one plane. If you looked at a two-dimensional reality like this, you wouldn't be able to see the depth here. It would just be a line, right? You'd only see the square if you tilted the two-dimensional reality this way. What I'm getting at is how things perceive in different dimensions. So let's say that cube traveled through the two-dimensional reality. A three-dimensional cube traveled through a two-dimensional reality. It goes down, and if it was able to travel through the two-dimensional reality, when it hit the two-dimensional reality, anyone living in a two-dimensional reality would only see or sense or hear or anything in two dimensions. So when the cube hit, they would only see a square, not the whole cube, because they only live in two dimensions. And as the cube passed through, they would see that square. And as it left and the square would exit, they would never see the entire cube. They would only see a square because they live in two dimensions. We live in three dimensions. We could see the entire cube. So if it was a ball, if it was a ball or a sphere, let's say it was a sphere traveling through a two-dimensional reality, when it first hit two dimensions, you only see a point, and then as it goes through, you see a circle getting bigger and bigger, and then you see a circle getting smaller and smaller, right? As the sphere travels through a two-dimensional reality. If you lived in that two-dimensional reality, that's what you would see. And then if it was a strange object with all sorts of different points, but in three dimensions, and it traveled through, you would see those points and those things appear and disappear in your two dimensions. And then go, and as it travels through, and you wouldn't know what it was. You wouldn't be able to see the entire three-dimensional shape because you only could deal with 2 dimensions because you lived in a 2-dimensional reality. Now, let's say we're in 3 dimensions and you have a 3-dimensional thing and a 4th dimensional reality, or 5th dimensional, or 6th dimensional, or whatever. Multi-dimensional reality traveled through our 3-dimensional space. How would you know what it was if you couldn't sense or see or deal with multiple dimensions past the dimensions that we live in? So in our reality, in our dimensions, as this multiple dimensional thing, whatever it may be, a multiple dimensional spaceship, multiple dimensional creatures, multiple dimensional objects, as they pass through 3 dimensions, we wouldn't be able to see the entire thing or know what's going on, because it would be just like the people in 2 dimensions not knowing what that sphere was. They can't see the entire thing. They only know what's traveling through. Same with us. As 3-dimensional creatures, we wouldn't be able to know or see or sense what's going on past 3 dimensions. So as multiple dimensional things travel through our reality, we only see part of it and we only sense part of it. And we have a real hard time understanding what it is exactly that's going on. And that, in my opinion, is what's happening for a lot of phenomenon. So when people have these issues, I recently was listening to a gentleman who was saying, oh, I believe in the multiverse because I had this crazy phenomenon happen to me and there must be a different universe. In my opinion, it was not a different universe. You would not be able to sense or even travel to a different universe, excuse me, but you would be able to sense or see partly other dimensional things traveling through our dimension. And as humans, we put we put definitions on things that we can't explain. We define things a certain way. So in modern society, we define things as a ghost, or we define things as an energy, or we define things as a UFO or unexplainable, or you know, a spirit, all these different things that we define things, but we really don't know what it is. And so we put this basic definition on it. In my opinion, that relates to multiple dimensional travel, and it relates to hologram theory. And hologram theory, there's a different reality, and it's different dimensions, and it's different different reality and dimensions that we have a hard time conceptualizing and understanding. And as we come in contact with those different dimensions and realities, we only see part of it because it can't exist completely in our 3 dimensions, in our limited 3-dimensional mind. Not that it's not existing completely in reality. So I know this is a hard concept for people to understand, and it's hard for me to understand, and I have had to think about it for a long time. So in different words, it just could mean that this reality that is around us, everything around us, includes different dimensions and includes all these different things in the multiple reality of hologram theory, in the multiple dimensions of our reality. There's all sorts of things going on around us, but we can't sense it. We can't see it. We can't hear it. We can't taste it. And so it never gets into our brains. But occasionally we get glimpses of it. Occasionally things do pass through. Occasionally we do see these things that are around us that are in different dimensions and different realities. It's still here. It's still right in front of us. We just can't explain it. We can't see it the way it's supposed to be seen because it exists in a different dimension. And so the implications of that are that there could be multi-dimensional creatures, either from a different world or from our world, or who knows, I don't know. Like Terrence McKenna said, like the machine elves, you have to take a lot of mushrooms to see them, but something of that nature that are unexplainable exactly who they are and where they're from, but they're right here. They're just existing in a different dimension or a different reality, and we can't see them in this three-dimensional reality. Now, maybe sometimes they can cross over and they might get a finger through into our reality. You'd be like, oh, what was that? And then so you say, I can't explain it. That must have been a ghost. I can't explain it. That's some crazy energy. And that's what we do. And that's okay. And that's the nature of reality. We can't explain these things. And so we put different definitions and we put different names on them. But in my opinion, this is all the same reality. This is all the same existence. It's just that we can't sense everything. We can't see everything. We can't hear everything. We can only see a little bit. We can only sense and taste and smell a little piece of that pie of reality. And that's the multiple dimensional conundrum that we live in. But I think there's a reason for that. There's a reason that we can't sense and deal with all that. And there's a reason why hologram theory is the way it is. And the reason is because we go crazy. The reason is as evolved apes, as evolved creatures on this planet, if we're not ready for multiple dimensional realities. We're not ready to deal with all that information. We're not ready to deal with all that light and crazy, weird things. We would go crazy and we wouldn't be able to, our brains can't process it. So that's what I think is happening, is we've evolved to process and to deal with things a certain way in this three-dimensional reality. And here we are, as we're evolving more, and as we're becoming as we're evolving more, and as we're becoming higher creatures and understanding more things, we're having more contact with these things, and our science is trying to explain it in a certain way, and our philosophy is trying to explain it in a certain way, but we haven't really jived it all together yet. And there's a lot of interesting stuff, like with particle physics and with really, really small things and really, really large things. There's a lot of good theories out there, and there's a lot of ways that science is moving towards explaining all of them. Quantum theory and quantum physics is heading there. So in quantum physics, in quantum theory, there's things like how particles can be in one place can be in two places at the same time. In quantum physics, you can observe how a particle can move, or something can move from one place to another faster than the speed of light. This is happening in quantum physics and quantum theory, and this is actually being observed, and it's leading to quantum computing, where instead of just basic computing, you have quantum computing, where things can be in multiple places at once to make way more computing power. And this is really happening. And so we are coming in contact, and we are being able to observe and to negotiate through this deeper world of multiple dimensions. So actually, I was just Neil deGrasse Tyson, the physicist, was explaining how those quantum theories could be multiple dimensions. He was saying that if we observe something moving faster than the speed of light, going from one place to another, that could just be something like I was saying. It could be a different type of dimensional thing, and we just can't see the entire dimensions of it. We only can witness it in 3 dimensions. So that's totally relating to that. It's totally relating to the future of our understanding of reality. But at this point, we don't have that entire picture. And I don't know if we'll ever have the entire picture, but I think as time goes on, we'll have a better picture. I don't think we'll have such a good picture we can travel back in time. I explained why earlier. Where's the time travelers? One more chance. Nope. Time travelers did not come back in time and tell me that I'm full of shit. So I'm sticking with my story that time travel is not going to happen. But I really do love multiple dimensional realities as a means of understanding interesting and unexplained phenomenon in our world. So the next time you have something weird happen to you, the next time you see something or sense some energy, or something, think you feel a ghost, remember that it's probably not a ghost. It's probably not something weird. It's probably just extra dimensional realities that you can sense somehow, or that can be traveling through you somehow. And that's totally cool. So it's nothing to be scared of. It's nothing to be frightened of, even though it is kind of frightening if you can't explain it, if you don't know what's going on. But it's nothing to be frightened of. It's just extra dimensional realities that are moving through us. So how many dimensions are there? I don't know. In string theory, in modern string theory, they say that for string theory to work, there's 11 dimensions. And they'll explain some of them past the fourth or fifth dimension, I believe, as getting as much smaller, like these smaller dimensions, like really, really minuscule places that you have to be really, really small to really understand and to get. In other words, if you were an ant, you would perceive reality different than a large human. If you were a million times smaller than an ant, you would perceive reality much different than an ant. And so that's different, smaller dimensions, how you perceive reality. I don't know how many dimensions there are, and I don't know the nature of those different dimensions. And there's a lot of theories about that. And I've read a lot of them, and I don't feel like explaining them to you because it's really trippy, difficult things to explain to a different person. So if you're interested in multiple dimensional realities, go read about it. There's a ton of stuff. Read about string theory, read about the 11 dimensions, read about different ways of looking at dimensions, and decide for yourself what you think it is. So I can't explain to you what those different dimensions are, and I can't tell you how many there are because I don't know past the theories. All I can tell you is that I feel, and that I think, and that I have the theory that there are multiple dimensions past our 3 dimensions, and that sometimes we encounter them. Sometimes they travel through us, but we can't see the whole thing. So we don't know really what's going on. And in a hologram sense, in the holographic universe, the hologram that we create is, our 3-dimensional reality is the hologram that we create. We create a 3-dimensional hologram. But there's other realities. There's implicit, the implicit energy and the implicit information that creates this 3-dimensional reality. And that could be higher dimensions. So when I say in an implicit reality, I don't really know exactly what that means because I've never been there. Although we kind of just exist in it right now. We just live it right now, right? But I've never completely shut my mind off of this 3-dimensional reality. I live in a 3-dimensional reality. I live in the 3-dimensional hologram. But there's different realities. So in the hologram theory, there, it jives. It connects with everything I was just saying. It's just a kind of a different way of looking at it. And inside of me, I feel that this is correct. I feel that this is the way that our reality is. I feel that this is the way that as humans, we are evolving to understand better and to negotiate better and to create better lives by understanding all this stuff better. And that's ultimately why I think it's important to think about it. That's ultimately why I think it's important that everybody thinks about it and everybody understands the reality that we live in is because the only way that we're going to have a better reality and better lives is if we understand the reality around us better. And that means understanding the multi-dimensional creatures that we may or may not encounter. Now, moving on to multiple universes, I said at the beginning of this, my talk about multiple dimensions, I said, I don't think multiple universes exist in reality. And that's what I feel inside of me as well. Now, again, there's a lot of modern physics theories about multiple dimensions. There's a lot of scientific papers about multiple dimensions. There's a lot of popular cultural things about multiple dimensions, a lot of science fiction about multiple dimensions. So it's fun and it's interesting, but I don't think that it has to do with our reality. I think multiple dimensions are where it's at. I don't think that multiple universes are something that should get our realistic attention as far as making our lives better. Like, that's just science fiction. And the reason I don't think multiple universes are a reality is the same reason I don't think time travel is a reality. There's a couple possibilities. Either there are multiple dimensions, or excuse me, not multiple dimensions. Either there are multiple universes and we can't get there, so the point is moot. Who cares if we can never ever get there and never ever sense them and never ever see them and never ever do anything with them? Why even think about it? Or the other possibility is that there are multiple universes, and if that's true, then where are these multiple universes? Where are these different realities? So in science fiction and in pop culture, there's a lot of stories about how multiple universes will cross over and things will happen when the multiple universes open up. And one of my favorite ones, one of them I like to talk about, is in a Star Trek: The Next Generation episode. I don't know how many of you have watched Star Trek: The Next Generation. It was a show in the late 80s, early 90s, Star Trek: The Next Generation. And in one of the shows, there was a premise where they were traveling through space, and one of the characters opened up a multiple dimensional, I keep using dimensional, multiple universal shift, and kept shifting between realities and he's going from one universe to the other universe. And in each universe, things were slightly different. There'd be a shift, and he'd shift to one universe, and then he'd be married to someone else, or there'd be a different captain of the ship, and so forth, so on and so forth, until finally they got to a point where the universes were crossing over so much. Different ships, different enterprises, in Star Trek, the Enterprise is the ship, different enterprises were popping into reality, and more enterprises were popping into reality, and so many enterprises were popping into reality, they were going everywhere, and they had to close the rift. And so they came up with some special sci-fi futuristic theory how to close the gap between the universes, and they did, and they got it, and then the show's over, and yay, they get to go home. But in the show, as more starships are entering the one reality of crossing over from the different universes, one of the characters says, at this rate, the entire sector of this part of the solar system will be completely filled in with ships, with starships, in 5.6 hours. And that theory would be correct. If there are an infinite number of universes and an infinite number of realities, and they somehow were able to cross over and were somehow able to enter into a different universe, all our realities would be so screwed. There would be an infinite number of me. Can you imagine how many an infinite number of me would be if someone came, if one me was able to cross over from a different universe and wanted to say hi? But it wouldn't just be one, it'd be an infinite number. It would be like 100 billion gazillion. it would just completely destroy. It's hard to conceptualize, but basically what would happen is the fabric of reality and the fabric of space-time around us would just completely and utterly be destroyed and would be ripped apart, and there would be no reasonable normal existence. So if there were multiple universes and there is an infinite amount of them, and in each one there's slightly different, but there was an infinite amount, so there's got to be a universe where someone figured out how to cross over, and there's got to be a universe where someone was evil and screwed something up, and there's got to be a universe where there's a gazillion Tonys that popped into existence to say hi. Like, if that theory is correct, normal reality would just be stripped away. And that's why I don't think it is correct. That's why I think it is only in the realm of science fiction. Because in science fiction, you can have fun with it and make it into a Star Trek episode. In science fiction, you can have fun with it and make a protagonist and have a hero and go back and forth and do this and do that and have fun. But in reality, if there was multiple universes, game over, man, game over. So that's why I do not think that there's a multiverse. That's why I do not think that there's an infinite amount of multiple reality universes, because I don't think that it would work. I don't think that reality would work. Simple as that. Reality would not work if there's multiverse. Or, again, I mentioned earlier, or there's multiple universes, but we'll never ever sense them. We'll never ever come in contact with them. They'll never be able to travel here, and we'll never be able to travel back and forth. So that's possible. But if that's true, we'll never ever know it. So what's the point? So there's no point in giving any more brain power to it. So that's why I think that sometimes theoretical physicists, when they talk about multiverse, the multiverse theory, and talk about different universes, I'm like, why are you thinking about different universes right now? Like, go with something that actually we can, for the betterment of humankind, because if there is a different universe, again, we'll never be able to come in contact with it. And why would we? It's just a different reality of existence in a different universe that you can't come in contact with. So what's the point? You'll never be able to measure anything there. You'll never be able to see anything there. You'll never be able to do anything there. So fuck it. Stop thinking about it. So that's my basic conclusion. Time travel and the multiverse are frivolous, fictional thoughts, and that's fun. And I'm not saying you shouldn't think about it. If you just, as normal people, yeah, you can think about it all you want. I just don't think that it's worth spending real amount of brain time trying to discover it, because I think that there's better things to discover, and that is multiple dimensions. I think all the people trying to figure out time travel and multiverse should switch over to multiple dimensional realities and talk about and think about and investigate multiple dimensional realities and how we deal with this dimension and come in contact with other dimensions, and how other dimensions travel through us and do some trippy shit. So that's my conclusion. I'm sticking to it. Multiple dimensions, multiple dimensional travel, multiple dimensional thought. Yes, good. Time travel, multiverse, multiple universe, multiple universal thought, multiple universal investigations. No good. So I want to end the show. I want to end the show with some 80s movies wisdom. Here in the Holographic podcast, we like to do 80s movies wisdom. This week I have one. Actually, Kyle gave me the idea for it. I was going to have him say it, but he couldn't make it tonight, so I'm going to do it. Sorry, Kyle, you missed out, buddy. 80s movies wisdom. We love 80s movies. this particular 80s movie was one of the classics, Empire Strikes Back. Everybody loves Empire Strikes Back. I think we did a Yoda one a while ago, but this one is Obi-Wan Kenobi in Empire Strikes Back. Yoda actually just dies. Spoilers, Yoda dies. And Luke Skywalker comes out of Yoda's little tiny guy hut, and Obi-Wan's Obi-Wan's an energy, maybe from a different dimension. And Obi-Wan's his energy, and Luke's kind of pissed off because he's like, why didn't you tell me that Darth Vader was my father? And Obi-Wan goes, he says, well, what I told you was true from a certain point of view. And Luke says, a certain point of view. And Obi-Wan's like, Luke, you'll find that a lot of the truths we hold on to depend on our point of view. And that's the wisdom. And it ties into exactly what I'm saying. A lot of the truths and a lot of the reality that we hold on to is just from our point of view, from our 3 dimensions. And that if we can expand that point of view, or if we can change our point of view, our reality and our truth would be completely and utterly different. So crazy stuff, right? I don't know. Think about it. That's it. That's what I had to say. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I'm glad I got my thoughts out. Thank you for joining me. And this is the Holographic Podcast. I'm Tone D, Holographic Podcast, signing off.